Looks so
All right.
wonderful.
But just so you guys know,
Oh, it's never.
How are you
You're so
doing?
slick.
Yeah.
we are recording
I'm
this.
good with the ladies out here.
You're bad.
Not the lawn show.
Oh, some water in there?
We got some.
Yeah, we got some.
Cookies, crackers, snack, M&M's,
All good
caramel
stuff.
cream.
Pizza.
I just got back from Illinois too.
Did you really?
Last Sunday.
Very nice. Yeah, so we are recording this so it can go up later on, so people can watch it if they're not here. So, but you're not being seen, it's just pretty much this view. Now, if you get up and stick your face in the camera, then people are gonna see you.
That's gonna be so sad.
So, if you need to hide yourself, this works. So, there you
I'm in
go.
the witness relocation program.
Why do I believe that?
Yes.
Remind me to tell you the story.
Actually, there's a whole neighborhood where we came from in New Mexico. We're from here originally, but went out to New Mexico for about almost 4 years. And there's a whole neighborhood out in a place called Rio Rancho, where they sent many, many mob relocation, witness protection type people. So you have like this little New Mexican neighborhood that's just full of Italian stuff.
Yeah, and some of the best
So-
Italian restaurants in all of New Mexico.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So it's kind of a weird place. And we were there. They had a robbery at a bank where these people used machine guns to actually go in there and shoot it all up mob style. And the only thing I remember was that they shot a dog too, which is kind of crazy. But it wasn't funny, but it was kind of funny the way they were describing it, except for the dog part.
But it didn't mimic exactly a robbery from like 10 years ago, which is about the time it takes for
Yeah, it had all the
relocation program to commit a crime.
it had all the earmarks of a previous mob type person. That was their MO and how they robbed banks, and nobody knew what happened to them. Well, they kind of figured out what happened to them.
Yeah.
So, New Mexico's a weird place, and we basically came back to the East Coast. We're from the East Coast originally, went out there for work, and started going around seeing a bunch of just strange things. The whole area is strange, and it's kind of like, have you ever gone to a town and the town is completely weird, but everybody there doesn't think it's completely weird because they're there, and you're kind of looking in. Yeah, it's kind of, exactly, like,
Marion?
yeah, Marion is kind of weird, but New Mexico is almost, it's pretty close to Arizona too, as far as like being like the Florida of the Southwest.
They're weird, but it's just commonly accepted. Like,
Yeah, they just, it's cool.
You know,
Everybody's like, yeah,
you're,
we're all weird.
and it's not just the creepy or unusual stuff. It's, your neurologist or your cardiac surgeon has a mohawk and more piercings than you. Or, Roswell has lights, street lights that are all in the shapes of alien heads. And that's just,
It's just got some quirky stuff. Sometimes the news is like, somebody got stabbed over a burrito. So it was a married couple. She had spent all day long, no, I'm sorry, it was tamales. She spent all day long making tamales, and he criticized them, and that was it.
she stabbed him.
So she kind of stabbed him just a little bit, and it made the news. And again, it's not funny, but it's just weird.
Oh, that one was funny.
Yeah, sure. They interviewed the guy, and he was okay. He was like, well, I should have just kept my mouth shut. And I was thinking, yeah, it's exactly the way it's this. Of course, that was delicious.
Some people have to learn the hard way.
And he did. Yes, sir. You want to know what a tamale is? We had a question. What's your question?
Well, quick and hurry, because they're important.
It's good, it's fine.
Are you sure?
I was just gonna say that I did see something that said a man with no arms or legs is armed and on the run.
I've seen that too.
That's actually Florida.
It's pretty close.
We would
man.
have stuff like that in New Mexico as well. They actually had a wanted poster for Chihuahua because it kept attacking a horse farm, things like that. And that's just everyday news. So
There's all sorts of strange things out there.
Yeah.
It's been fun though, because we have had a chance to see a bunch of the weird stuff, which is what we're gonna talk about tonight. And I will be upfront, there has to be a part two, because we decided, we were asked if we would do it, and we said, sure. And then once we sat down to kind of write some things out, to, you know, put little pictures up and stuff like that, it just kept coming back to us, because you get away, right? We've been here since, actually, we got here Thanksgiving Day. And so we've been away for a while, and the more we started thinking about us, the more stuff we started to remember. And it's like, oh yeah, bottomless lakes with the giant turtle at the bottom of it, forgot about that. And then it's like, and it just kind of kept going and going. So we got to have a part two. So this is pretty much going to talk about sort of the area and some of the stuff you can expect, just general sort of stuff. And then the next time we do it's going to be all of our personal experiences. We're going to pop in a couple of personal experiences we've had, but it keeps coming back to me even more, because I'm telling her, I'm like, remember that? She's like, oh yeah, we can write that down. We can write that down, we can write this down. And plus we have to go through and dig out all of our pictures and stuff, because we both worked for Canon when we were in New Mexico, and our goal was to travel and go to all these places and take pictures. I mean, why not? You know, put them up on Instagram and just kind of put them out there as sort of the goal, because photography is a cheap date. If you have a camera, and she has a camera, and you have a place to go, all she needs is a tank of gas. So we have a tendency to do things kind of on the inexpensive or on the cheap, and that was one of the things that we have in common. So photography and videography and stuff like that, that's what we did. So, you know, on the weekends, we would pile our van up and just head to the west and just go try to find stuff, you know. And there's a lot of weird history out there, and in New Mexico in general, the tourism board is really good about picking up anything weird and quirky and making it into something. So you have a list of 200 things you can do in New Mexico. And a lot of them are disappointing, but a lot of them are really good. And the better part of that is, if you find and talk to locals, they will tell you stuff and have you go places that you'd never see on that list. And she's been fortunate enough to make friends with a lot of the natives out there, because that's what they call Native Americans in the Southwest, is natives.
Yeah.
And you have to be invited to go to certain places, like reservation, you know, certain parts of the reservation. She's gone to a bunch of different places.
Later
And-
on in the slides,
Yeah.
there are
So-
pictures of a hidden church that I actually put onto Google. Google's been around since forever, but this location never existed in the digital realm until I put it on Google, because
So, it's kind
it's
of a
just,
Crazy
the
thing.
natives showed me this place, they showed me how to get to it, and I took as many photos as I could, took all the GPS information I could, and submitted it to Google. And it's a church that's been there since, gosh,
1400s.
yeah.
Wow.
So, yeah.
And the natives, you know, if you ever go out there and they invite you to a feast, it's like a big party. It's kind of an honor to go. They don't just invite anybody. It's sort of it's different than it is here, but it's a fun time. You ready? So I'm Greg, and this is Naomi,
Hi.
and we actually have a podcast. It's called the Creep Geeks Podcast. It used to be called the Cheap Geeks Podcast, because I did a bunch of Cheap Geek stuff, and I have a YouTube channel with all that. And most of our podcasts, we would talk about weird stuff, and nobody would listen to it. We had like tens of followers, and I say that we actually have a pretty good pretty good following, but because it didn't make sense, because people were like, you're not talking about cheap stuff, you're not talking about geek stuff, you're just talking about
Weird stuff.
weird stuff. So it came to me one day to create a podcast called the Creep Geeks Podcast. Makes sense, right? No, it doesn't. Nobody can find that either, because they want to find it in the Cheap Geek Podcast. So it's been a little bit of a thing, but since we like to talk about all the weird stuff and paranormal stuff and just odd stuff, funny news and stuff like that, we thought it made sense. So we sort of started over and let a lot of the Cheap Geek stuff, which has a pretty good YouTube following and all that, sort of die off and sort of split it out. So we actually have two separate things going on. So if you ever see Cheap Geek, that's me and Naomi. If you ever see Creep Geeks, that's also me and Naomi. But when we came here in November, what was the first meeting we went to here in December?
Mhm.
We were looking for like-minded people, and we wanted the weird stuff, because this whole area is just as freaking weird as New Mexico. You know, it is. There's a lot of weird things here. But if you don't know anybody, aside, because we have family here, aside from family, you don't know where to go, you don't know what to do, you don't know who to see, right? So we happened to come across the gathering, and we're like, this is great, and Mary is great, and Jennifer is great. It's just like, it's been too good to be true in a lot of ways, because when you show up from the Southwest, it's different here, you know. It's been a really good thing for us, and we've seen a bunch of the presentations and stuff, and we got asked to do this one. And what better thing to talk about than talk about something that's completely different than this area, right? But it's the same. It's weird. I don't know how to describe it. So it's been really synchronous for us, and we've even gone out on paranormal investigations and stuff like that. So it's been fun. Haven't been scared yet. So
And now that we've pretty much introduced ourselves to you guys, you know, as a Creep Geeks podcast, if you have those weird stories or you know of something here in Marion that's just really odd or unusual, reach out to us. We want to hear from everybody. That's the point of our podcast, is that storytelling experience, and to share what's creepy or weird or paranormal about wherever we're at. So share those stories with
Yeah.
us. We want to talk to people. We want to interview people. That's the whole point of why we do this. So, yeah.
and it's fun. We have people come up and talk to us, and it always surprises me when they do. Even though that's what we want, you know, it's kind of like, who are you, in a way. And last person we talked to was a really nice lady. She came up and she was like, Creep Geek, huh? And I was like, how do you know that? You know, like, why do you just assume I'm a creep? I forgot I had my hoodie on. And she was like, well, you're wearing a hoodie. And I'm like, oh, yeah, okay. It's like, and we have the big white van that has the sticker on the back, that kind of thing. So it's starting to work. And everybody's got a story. You know, they'll tell you, it's like, hey, can we record that? And they're like, no. It's beginning to be the same way out here, a lot of it. So, and that's the way it is in New Mexico. Everybody has a story, but you're like, can we put that on a podcast? They don't want nobody to know, which is weird, you know? I don't know why. You ready?
Yes.
Okay.
So, we moved to New Mexico in late 2015. Before we moved there, we did a lot of research. We looked at all these vlogs, we went to all these websites, we saw all these great, incredible things like Roswell, and all these tourism books that we picked up at like yard sales and stuff like that, and Route 66, like Klein's Corners, all these beautiful, cool things. We got super excited. On our way, as we moved there, on our way to all these weird and quirky things, we just kept discovering more weird stuff. The stuff they don't talk about in these books or on the website. And that's a little bit of what we're going to talk about. So, 3 years, almost 4. 2 humans, 3 different vehicles, 2 dogs, over 7,406 miles of open road. And the word open is very loose, because that does not include all of the forest roads, all the native roads. The state of New Mexico has over 7,000 highways and state-recognized roads that you can travel to different places. New Mexico is the 5th or 6th largest state as far as landmass, but it is 35th in population. There's a lot of open space and not a lot of people. So you could travel for days sometimes and not see another person.
Our backyard was desert. You
I'm-
could basically take the road and drive 30 miles in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah, our little neighborhood, you could drive out and literally drive off a mesa after 4 miles, and there would be nobody to save you, because and that was a suburb, you know? I mean, that's.
Yes.
What's a mesa?
You ever seen a plateau? Like a flat top?
Top of a mountain?
Yeah.
Sure, where you could be here and then the mesa drops off the other side, or a plateau drops off. Those are mesas, and they're typically sort of separated. They'll be kind of by themselves. So it's kind of like a flat top mountain.
So a plateau is more smaller, and a mesa is the size of a small city or the size of a small town. It's just a bigger version of a plateau.
And there's a lot of mesas out there where you might find where there used to be a settlement up there, or a church, or you know, all sorts of stuff. So
Yeah.
you never know what you're gonna find. And there's lots of abandoned things out
You
there.
want back here?
But along with all that vast openness, you also have, you know, I said you could go days without seeing a person. First thing you ask when you do see those people is, hey, tell me about this area. And they tell you, like we were saying earlier, these crazy stories about where they live or where they grew up. And you say, can I interview you? Absolutely not.
Yeah.
So they would tell us some weird stuff, so. This is the vehicle we traveled in. It is a DIY camper van. It's called the Albino Rhino. If you saw us, you'd flag us down, we'd pull over, we'd talk to you. We later upgraded to, I'm sorry, this is the Great Bay.
This is my slide. Thank you very much. Okay, so we had a 2002 Dodge Ram Van 3500, which was the one that says Grants, New Mexico. And it's basically used to be a handicap or senior assisted living van, and we set it free. And so what it did for us is it became the Great White Buffalo. So it just kind of lumbered along the desert, taking us all sorts of places. So it was our camper van because unlike this particular area, you can go and camp in the desert in most places that we went, which is like Bureau of Land Management land, for 14 days.
For free.
For free, cost you nothing. So, and you had to be careful because sometimes you could be on reservation land. And there were a couple of times where we were out in the wrong place, but the people were really nice. And since it doesn't rain that much, you just get dusty,
Yeah.
which is nice. You don't get muddy. So we took this van everywhere, and it's a simple camper van. We loved it, and it just got to the point where we had to do a little bit of an upgrade. So we bought a 2018 Ram ProMaster 2500 camper van. So, and that one, with a contest or through a contest, became known as the Albino Rhino, because it kind of looks like a rhino. The Buffalo looks like a buffalo. Everybody that's seen it says, "Man, what's your van?" Yeah, but what's it called? We said it's the Great White Buffalo. They were into it. So it was great. It was a good van, but we actually left it with some people that wanted to do the same thing we wanted to do, and drive around and take pictures and see weird stuff. So we feel pretty good. But the Albino Rhino has proved its mettle already. So it's I like vans, man. It's a camper van. That's the best way to go. You don't have to spend all that money on hotels and stuff. And you know, the way New Mexico is set up, you can stay in a rest area, like, you know, off the highway kind of rest area, for 2 weeks. Isn't that dumb? Like here, it's like, you know, 4 hours max, right? But you can stay 2 weeks in a rest area, and some people do. So why am I gonna spend $175? We had a hotel room, we did a lot of travel before, and I had enough points we could stay in hotels for free. But when you have dogs, it's instantly $100 that you don't get your money back. So no matter what, it was $100. So we decided, we'll show you, we're not paying us $100 a night to stay in a hotel room. We'll spend $35,000 on a new van. So that's what we did. It's just kind of is what it is. But
Now, the truth of New Mexico is that the Southwest has been inhabited and influenced by the world longer than most people think. There's a lot of bias in the United States. Everybody thinks of, you know, the Plymouth Rock, which was 1620, or Jamestown, 1607. The lost colony of Roanoke, North Carolina, so technically it was 1585. That's when most people think, you know, America happened, and that's not necessarily true. New Mexico is one of the longest inhabited, continuously inhabited areas of the Americas. We have St. Augustine, Florida, which kind of beats it out at 1565, but the Grand Canyon, we have 1540s. The Taos Pueblo, which is a place we love visiting, has been continuously inhabited by Europeans since 1615. And then Santa Fe, as far as Europeans are concerned, 1607 to 1610. Prior to that, for Taos and Santa Fe, they were always inhabited either by Native Americans or natives, or pre-natives, so pre-Columbian peoples. Both those areas have always been inhabited and influenced. So if you were in areas like, this is Jemez, which was, 1700s. This church was originally built by the Spanish as a Catholic place for Pueblo people, but prior to that, the Pueblos had their own church there that was there for hundreds of years. And then prior to that, it was a pre-Columbian site where people would gather and trade goods. So no matter what, there's always been some sort of weird influence in New Mexico, unlike the rest of the United States.
And Jemez means human, so they just call themselves human.
Yeah.
And Zia is basically a Mexican word for, well, it's really a native / Mexican word for sun.
Yeah.
So if you ever see the New Mexico flag, it looks like a sun. It's called the Zia sun.
So when you see things like Jemez Pueblo, or the word Pueblo itself, Pueblo also means people, so the human people, the Jimenez Pueblo, they have always described themselves as just man, and that's it.
Yeah.
It's like, it's been there longer than what most of us go, oh, the Pilgrims were here. No, there's always been something human, spiritual, or inhuman in New Mexico.
Yeah, since about the 1300s is where I came in.
This church, almost though it was a pre-Columbian or native site in the 1400s. In the 1500s, this was carved out. This is actually a very large canyon. The Spanish carved it out and they put a statue of Mary. That statue has been replaced a billion times in the centuries, but this is called the Portales Church of the Hidden Cove. It's located in an area called Pojate, which is on the Laguna Pueblo. So it's the Laguna Reservation. And when I say it's on the Pueblo, I mean we still drove an hour to find it. And this is one of those places that the natives took me and showed me how beautiful it is. They told me how haunted it was. And it's creepy. If you sit in any of the stone chairs right there and you just sit and stay quiet, you start to hear voices and weird sounds. But the moment you get up or get out of the stone chairs, the voices stop. During Easter or the Festival of St. Joseph, which is a mix of Native and Catholic celebrations, you'll find 100 people in here just celebrating. And this is just some rosaries because there's a weird mix of religion there. It's not just Spanish Catholicism, there's also Native beliefs, and then just weird stuff that both traditions picked up, and they've turned it into their own flavor of Catholicism.
Yeah, Mexican, Aztec,
Yeah,
Stasi. It's a weird mix of cultures.
yeah, but literally up until 2 years ago, this place, according to Google, did not exist. Because all the overhead shots just show the canyon. Now, whether it's pre-Columbian culture, Spanish conquistadors, or the American pioneers, it's just, again, it's been influenced. This area is another pre-Columbian area. On these cliffs, there are the remains, and they're not impressive enough to take or put in a slideshow, but leveled out floor plans where there used to be large buildings that have been there since the 1300s. You'd climb up, and to the right of this there was a staircase, or rocks. You'd climb up and you'd see this stuff that's been here forever. And it's cool because you stand up there and you can see for 50 miles because that's how clear it is.
And if you ever go out for like a little touristy adventure and you go through Los Alamos, which is a national laboratory out there where they do all sorts of crazy stuff, you can wind up being able to go to this particular place
Yeah.
and take a little tour, and it's super creepy.
And what's weird is these are cliff dwellings from Native Americans. This was pre-Columbian, so before natives. And then this is Cabizon, which is a ghost town. All these are fairly close to each other. No settlement was so successful. It's a very hard life out there. People will try to create a homestead or create a town. Town lasts maybe 10 years and then they just up and disappear. There was no real reason why these people left. And these people, they say there's no reason. We think it's, modern archaeologists think it's because something drove them out. This was just a ghost town. There's 400 ghost towns in New Mexico.
Yeah.
There are over
So there's
400.
over 400 ghost towns in New Mexico, 60 of which you can visit.
Yeah.
And one of the weird things about the cliff dwellings is when I went to school and they talked about the cliff dwellings, they say that the people lived in the cliffs to protect themselves or be protected against, whatever was in the area. And that they would pull the ladders up to put them inside, inside the cave so they wouldn't get attacked. Well, all those ladders are longer than those things are as deep. So it'd be like trying to pull a 2-story ladder up into a 1-bedroom house or a small 2-room house. It doesn't work that way. And the thought was that they'd hold themselves up in these cliffs because with other tribes that were out and warring tribes, it was easier for them to fight in that hole than it was to go out and fight them. And there's legends of the natives fighting like giants in this area, like red-haired cannibalistic giants with 2 rows of teeth and the whole 6 fingers and all of that. So, but you don't really hear that when you go to take the tours.
Yeah.
And they have found remains out in that area that are not there anymore.
Yeah.
They've been taken, and that's, we're gonna do a part 2 where we talk about that kind of stuff. But a lot of the legends and stuff that you hear are different than the touristy stuff that you see. And we went to those dwellings, and there's no way you can pull one of those ladders up in there, so
Yeah, like this plaque
it doesn't make any sense.
right here talks nothing about the mythology of how those people got there, or why they left, or the fact that this mesa right here is where a giant, according to Navajo legend, a giant thunderbird landed and let people off its back to colonize the whole area.
Yeah,
You don't
Wow.
see that in the pamphlets or on the plaques. You just see, here's an old mesa. The building was built in the 1300s. You have to talk to locals, or you have to
just
do
sort of tie it
research.
together.
Yeah.
And 3% of the population is Navajo, 30% of the population speaks Spanish, and so it's a pretty mixed culture, but
Yeah.
it's some of the weird stuff. And Albuquerque itself is really quirky. So, and like this, I can't believe you put this in there. But, yeah.
When we first got there, literally, we got there, we moved our stuff, we set up our TV, because that was the first thing we did. First thing that comes on was a live chase of a criminal whose pants are found at one end of the city. He escaped here, but then he came back up and carjacked somebody else up here. And then what we didn't get on the picture is he went that way towards the mesa, which is uninhabited. So. that was-
Pants found.
Pants found.
They found his pants.
Carjacking. The state is rich in culture. Albuquerque's very rich in culture. They're not real strong on education. If you pay attention to the news, Albuquerque, New Mexico ranks 50th in education. This was a federally printed out sign where privilege is spelled incorrectly. They printed 36 of those just for one national park.
Yeah.
So, but they're fine with it because it's Albuquerque. So, this is another example of a mesa. And this is also an example of a mesa. The problem is, this is the mesa. We lived here, and this is the mesa. People would go out to the mesa to do terrible things, including driving cars off the edge. This is at least 300 feet drop, at least, to about there. You will find things like abandoned vehicles, bodies, stuff you're not supposed to see, black magic. You would come upon this stuff daily. One of my things was when I'd get done working, I'd take the dogs out, we'd go looking for petrified wood. That's just how I spent my days, and I'd do it big time on the weekends. I would pack snacks for me and the dogs, get in the car, drive towards the mesa. I'd find fossils, just various rocks, because you could, because that's how New Mexico is. But then I'd stumble upon crime scenes,
Auto graveyard.
auto graveyard. So, and these are the nicer pictures. There's worse pictures where I'd find some really bad stuff. And Albuquerque just accepts it. It's
Well, yeah, and technically this was in the Rio Rancho area, but
yeah.
the problem we had with the whole thing is that if you're ever standing on top of a mesa and you can see 30, 40, 50 miles and see all this amazing scenery, you're like, how can the people who live here do this?
Yeah.
You know,
I mean, this car was on fire for a while.
it was even on the news. It's like, oh, graveyards found, that kind of thing.
You're looking at something.
Cars get stolen a lot. If you
Yeah.
buy a car in New Mexico, you'll pay about $1,000 more for it just because it's a high theft area for cars.
Your auto insurance is 50% more.
Yeah, and in the news, they say, don't leave your car running until warming up because it gets cold out there. And I think in 1 month, there was 126 cars taken.
With 36 of them on the same day.
Yeah, just people leave it. You gotta laugh because when you're there, what else you gonna do? So they tell you don't leave your car running because somebody will steal it. And then people are always shocked when it happens. They'll be on the news going, I don't understand it. I had the car running. I went inside just for a minute. Well, yeah.
This scenery is cut off. You can see all the way almost to the next state, Arizona, from here. You could see mountains, you could see everything. So it's a view almost as impressive as a Grand Canyon, and then there's all this trash and crime. So, yeah.
Makes it interesting. And the problem with it is being so dry, you can have a car that's been sitting there for 80 years.
Yeah.
It's still, they don't rust, you know? I don't know if that one's 80 years old. but-
Yeah. Again, going with some of that grim, creepy, unusual stuff that happens. The West Mesa murders, these happened early 2000, well, they were found in the early 2000s. The West Mesa murders literally happened a few blocks from our house. The remains of 8 women have been found. At the time, there was 6 that were immediately discovered, and they ranged in ages as young as 13 all the way up into their late 20s. This is some of the beautiful scenery where these women's bodies were found. This is us driving up some of that beautiful scenery. The problem was the excavation of these murders, which took over 2 years to be found. Nobody knew what was going on. Nobody could really accurately date what happened to these women. And they had no suspects. Over time, they had 8 different suspects, and none of them panned out. At one point, they thought it was like a trucker who was going through different states. I know a lot of y'all listen to podcasts and have heard things like the smiley face killer. At one point, they thought it was a smiley face killer. To this day, these murders have not been solved. And you have to understand, if you live in Albuquerque, New Mexico, or Rio Rancho, New Mexico, it's going to be a part of your everyday life that you may discover a body or a crime scene. You will find terrible graffiti like, "I once killed a man and his body is up here." And that's their sense of humor. It's a tragedy because there's so much rumor. There's a shrine dedicated to these women. They supposedly haunt the shrine, or at night you sit out there and you can listen to them. It's unfortunate because it's just accepted that this type of thing goes on. So,
That's our trailblazer.
yeah.
That's been the happiest part of this slide.
I know, it's really sad, but the point is that, this is a high school. This is one of my friends' neighborhoods, technically. It was all found right here. You go that way and it's just a beautiful, this stuff. It's,
Way to bring them down.
I know. And you have that being accepted, but in the same breath, you have beautiful graffiti being very proud to be New Mexican. So, protect your Chaco is a common statement from all the natives and some of the Chicanos, is to protect the area that is New Mexico. And, this is a beautiful mini mountain area, and then graffiti. No.
Let's talk about some monsters.
Yeah, we'll talk about some of the monsters.
So, chupacabra, you guys have heard of chupacabra, right? Goat sucker. Could be a flying thing, could be a dog. Nobody seems to know. But out there, whenever attacks happen, everybody says it's chupacabra. You'll find more dead coyotes than you do anything else, but
Yeah.
you'll see a lot of that, and that's part of the problem too. It is desert, so if something dies, it does stay for a long time.
Yeah.
So sometimes you look at stuff and it gets so dried out you can't tell what it is.
A lot of that.
Mummified remains. They found all sorts of things in those cave dwellings and stuff, and they can't really get an accurate dating on how old it is. And one place that we used to go to called Bisty Badlands, they found a sort of mummified, dehydrated, person, and they thought they'd been there since like the 50s. And they had like Air Jordans on, so they'd only been there maybe 20 years, but you can't tell. And the problem with a lot of New Mexico in general is when it comes to going to some of the touristy places, you can step off the trail and not be found. And so if you've ever heard of like missing 411 and
David
people
Paulides.
getting lost in national parks and things like that, a lot of it is not a UFO coming to get you or the weird stuff. It's just the fact that you're not prepared. You step off the trail, nobody knows where you are because everybody's staying on the trail, and that's it. Because you have to do things like bring water. When we would travel, we actually brought enough food to last for 2 weeks, and we brought about 40 gallons of water. just for us two and two dogs. Because you need to be prepared, because it's entirely possible to go out there 20 miles in your 4x4, because you go off-road just by, putting your turn signal on. And nobody would know you're there, because you're out of cell phone service, nobody uses CVs anymore. So you kind of have to be prepared for that sort of thing. And a lot of tourists aren't, and they just think that since you're in a national park, it's safe. And there's signs that warn, we didn't put some of the signs that we have taken pictures of, but like, my favorite, or one of my favorites is, the plague still exists in New Mexico.
The Black Plague is still
So
an
you
active
got bubonic plague,
infection.
black plague, you got hantavirus, all that stuff, because it's so dry, things don't go away. I mean, here, things decay and they rot because of the moisture, but there, it just goes dormant.
We've had
Bubonic plague, man.
anthropologists.
I'm not kidding at all.
Anthropologists and cryptozoologists will go out to New Mexico, and they're so used to areas like North Carolina or the Pacific Northwest, and they're out to find Bigfoot or chupacabra. Well, these Bigfoot hunters and stuff like that, or chupacabra hunters, they're so used to how lush and rainy it is here in, like, other regions, that this guy was an anthropologist, and he stumbled upon what he thought was a chupacabra skull. If you look hard enough at that, you realize it's actually a muskrat or some variation of a muskrat.
It's like a bobcat.
I stepped 10, 15 feet off the trail, and I found this skeleton that looks identical to when you type chupacabra into Google. Right here, I kicked up some dirt. Actually, my dog kicked up some dirt. It's clearly a husky. It wasn't a chupacabra. It was a husky's passed away, and that's how quickly the elements dried up and turned it into a chupacabra skeleton. So it's very common out there with the types of diseases like bubonic plague, and for everything else out there, you see something that looks like a chupacabra, it's probably a dog with mange or some sort of coyote with a weird disease.
Yeah, but every
So-
year, there would be at least 1 or 2 chupacabra sightings.
And they
every
make it
year.
on the news.
So,
So, yeah.
we also lived in a neighborhood where we actually had like packs of coyotes that would run the neighborhood.
Yeah. Lived in a suburb where one night we had a pack of 11 coyotes run down the main street, the main thoroughfare that separated the neighborhood.
Yeah.
And what was scary was we heard all 11 of them, but then on the other side of the neighborhood, you could hear more. So how many coyotes were running through the neighborhood snatching up little chihuahuas?
And when we first moved to New Mexico, there really wasn't that many coyotes here at all. They were saying that, oh, the Mississippi River will keep coyotes from coming here. They're everywhere. So, it's,
But if you're in the Southwest and you see something and you think it's a chupacabra, it's probably not. However, teratons and thunderbirds. Teratons and thunderbirds, this goes back to the culture we spoke about earlier in the presentation. Giant birds have been in American mythology and American folklore since people have been here. There has always been a story about some sort of great and magnificent bird. The Navajo would speak of these things that look like dinosaurs, or this giant bird called the roc. And roc, the Navajo people would climb onto its back and it would take them places to settle them. Now in modern times, and modern is a loose terminology, we have sightings of these extremely large animals. This one looks like a pterodactyl, or as you like to say, pterodactyl.
yeah, because the P is not silent. Pterodactyl.
No, this is a condor, and it's really that big. That's two large, I think, Navajo? They're either Navajo or Lakota. That's two dudes, and that bird is really that big. This bird is really carrying away a goat. You have these birds and you see them, not just in New Mexico, all of the Southwest, and they'll just fly.
Last year, there was, I think, 72, we'll just say Thunderbird sightings, because it's a mix
Yeah.
between the pterodactyl size or style and then just a big giant bird size. So I think if anywhere these things could live, they could definitely live in New Mexico, because there's so much wide open space. And if you think about seeing a big bird and you're driving your car and you're looking off in the distance, New Mexico has mountains and things like that, but you're already at a really high elevation, so there's really not a whole lot in the sky. So what would be, if you could look back 20, 30, 40 feet, you might get an idea of the scale of this thing, but if that thing is, 25 feet long with the wings, and you're in your car, I mean, how do you get a perspective on that? How can you see what it is? So you might be seeing something like this all the time and not really know.
Yeah.
So,
Um,
and there's people every year that, man, they'll say, I was hunting or I was doing, whatever, and this big bird just stepped off and took off, and so,
yeah,
and people will believe you.
yeah.
They don't go, oh, you're crazy, or, oh, whatever, you've probably seen something else. They're like, yeah, okay.
This is a
My
hiker.
grandpa's seen that, and it's all
This is a
over.
hiker, and this actually made the news. KQRE and KOB are the big news out in New Mexico. And because he's a respected hiker, he had a Thunderbird sighting, and they respect him as a legitimate person. He went ahead and went on the news, and he's like, yeah, I was hiking this area, and we saw this, it wasn't just me, it was other hikers as well. We saw this huge bird about, 30 or 40 feet big.
Yes, as large as small planes.
Yeah, and,
But the cool thing about that particular sighting was that they seen two.
yeah.
So if you see two, it could be a mating pair. I mean, who knows? I think it's more likely for me personally, with all the cryptid stuff out there, to be able to see just a big giant bird, because it's a bird. It's just bigger, right? I mean, that would be more something to see. But all the natives, and when you go back and look at some of all the carvings and the inscriptions, they all have thunderbirds on them. And thunderbird can be good, thunderbird can be bad. It just depends. It's all about change. It's really all it is. So, speaking of thunderbird,
So, one of the places that is very important, we showed earlier in the slides, but actually the most important place to the Thunderbird cryptozoology belief is Shiprock, New Mexico. And that's because this is where the Great Thunderbird Rock crash landed and established one of the first pueblos, or the first villages of mankind.
yeah, carried the native people.
Yeah, on his back, and then kind of hit the ground hard, and then nested and turned into the Shiprock. It got its name by the Europeans as Shiprock. Prior to that, the natives basically established a whole living area here, and that's where they lived and paid reverence to rock. It's a beautiful place to take pictures, but it's
also a ley line area.
yeah, it's a weird mystical area. There's ley lines. You go to this area and you just feel, if you're a sensitive or you describe yourself as a sensitive for paranormal stuff, the whole place has a presence, and it feels very heavy and very, almost a feeling of reverence, like you were to step into a really old church.
Yeah.
And that was a very common thing for me. I would go to some of these very old sites, and you could just tell, like your skin would crawl or your skin would feel, you get like goosebumps, because there is a feeling of how significant this was to human civilization. Or you feel spirits or whatever, you feel something there that's older than you and older than mankind. But supposedly, this is where the first Thunderbird and all current Thunderbirds will go, here in Shiprock.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And not too far away from Shiprock is a place called Chaco, and it's in the Chaco Canyon area, and it's a World Heritage Site. It is what they consider to be one of the first established cities in North America. And it predates all the natives back to the Anasazi. And you can go and camp there, and there's no facilities, so there's no water or anything like that. But at night when you listen, you can hear chants, and they'll be in different languages. And there's chants that you can hear in Navajo, and there's also the Old Tongue, which is the Anasazi tongue that you can hear. And there's a bunch of different sort of things that sort of pop up in that particular area. One of them is a blue phantom, a wet blue phantom. For some reason, this blue phantom will appear and it's wet.
Yeah.
Because the story is that somebody died there swimming in a sacred well where they weren't supposed to be swimming, and they died. And that's where they haunt it, and you can see them. They just appear wet, and you can see the wet footprints. So, because the whole area is supposed to be sacred.
And the cool thing about that one is, like, even the park rangers know that one.
Yeah.
So they'll tell you that story
And-
as you're signing for your campsite and stuff like
Yeah.
that.
And one of the park rangers was chasing this wet blue phantom around, and only thing left was the Electrofest.
Yeah.
But you can hear it, you can hear the chanting and all the drums and all that sort of thing. It's just kind of crazy.
Yeah.
Ever get a recording?
There's a couple of recordings
me.
from other people on YouTube, but I'm gonna warn you now, New Mexico's sense of humor, you might click on one of these and you might hear a little noise and then it's a gotcha. So there's like a sound effect to scare you on purpose. But I think, yeah, there's one paranormal organization out there that has a recording someplace on YouTube.
And there's places you can go if you're invited by the natives for the reservation to see this sort of thing and experience it, but they won't let you record, they won't let you do anything like that because to them it's sacred. It's an insult.
I've been invited to 3 different festivals. I was not allowed to bring my camera to any of them.
So it sort of depends. They'll do
Yeah, I got,
like festivals where you can go take pictures. They're really for tourists, but anything real.
I almost got thrown out of one festival because I was taking a picture of my native friend eating a snow cone because I whipped out my camera phone. That's how no cameras these people are. One of the places that's not in here is the Acoma Sky City, which is a very old place. One of the oldest still continuous and inhabited places. It is $25 to bring your camera in, and there's a waiting list. So that's how strict they are. It's all storytelling. Yeah. Do you want to talk about
Oh
this
yeah,
one?
skinwalkers. Native lore gives me the creeps for a lot of different reasons, but the one that gives everybody the creeps is skinwalker. And just to kind of keep things sort of PG, skinwalker, people look at him as being like Dogman or werewolf, but it doesn't necessarily have to be that way. This is like supposedly like an alleged picture of a skinwalker, but that could be a hoax. But the thing about skinwalker is that you never know what kind of form they're actually going to take and at what stage the form that they have is where they are along in the process. Because in order to become a skinwalker, depending on what tribe you're from or what native you're from, you have to do things that, just to kind of keep it sort of like eat a family member. Things like that, because you have to take the power. So that's what you're doing. You have to take the power and you offer the power up to become a skinwalker. So it can be really creepy.
It is a lot of black magic and a lot of going against your village's typical traditions. So,
Right.
you know, if you're Navajo Pueblo or your Navajo village, all of your homes faced east towards the sun, your home faces south or your home faces west.
So you can see the practitioners
Yeah.
that do black magic
Now,
because
the previous slide shows what everybody thinks, it's a werewolf or whatever. This is what a real skinwalker is. They dress deliberately like black arts practitioners as far as native beliefs. They do not show their faces because depending on what stage they are in the skinwalker, you don't want to get caught, basically. You know, if you're in your human form, you don't want somebody to recognize your human form and then later on go and he's the skinwalker, get him. The word that we use right here, which is Navajo, which is Yi Nadoloshi, and that's a terrible butchering of it. It is only one vowel off from another word, which actually means two souls. The concept of having two souls broken apart and that you are constantly struggling between those two souls. When the struggle is lost and your soul is overtaken, that is when you become a skinwalker. It's such a popular belief in the Southwest that it's not something to joke around with, especially when you're talking to the natives. We went to an area that's highly native. Once you go west of Albuquerque, almost everything's native. I mean, a lot of that whole section is Navajo land. And we went and vacationed in Grants, New Mexico, where you throw that term around and people just stop talking to you. We had a good experience camping out there where we thought everything was fine. Our dogs were a little unnerved. We woke up in the morning, cooking breakfast, and all of a sudden, because we were in the middle of a small canyon, just nothing but wolf cries surrounding us. So at that point, our older dog, Ben, he packed up his things and got in the van and waited for us to get ready to go.
This dog went and hid in the bushes and was watching us, waiting for us to pack up and go, because he didn't want any part of it.
Yeah, he actually grabbed
And
his
this was
leash
along the Continental
and got
Divide
in.
Trail.
That's
And
because
we've
he
been-
knew what they were talking
Yeah,
about.
absolutely. Yes, sir.
What do the skinwalkers do once they're skinwalkers?
So that is where, once they hit their skinwalker form, that is where they have more magical power than the other magic practitioners in the tribe. So they will do things that the normal healers and normal medicine men will not do. So let's just say you're a young girl and you want somebody to fall in love with you, and the medicine man of your tribe says, no, you should let things play out as they do. You go to the skinwalker or the black magic practitioner and say, I want him to fall in love with me. They will give you, he'll probably give that woman a spell, but then he'll go do his own black magic.
But
make
you have to
curses.
pay the price. You have to
Yeah.
pay a very hefty price.
They're also the type of people who will attack other members of the tribe. Yep.
Are they, are the skinwalkers natives?
Yes, so that's another common problem with modern times. Skinwalkers are, it's passed down through a family or through a tribe. So if your grandfather or your great-grandfather was a medicine man and you're an accountant, I'm sorry, you still have that skinwalker and that medicine man in your family line. So you have younger people, like your age almost, who have no idea that they have skinwalker or medicine man in their family.
Could a chief be a skinwalker?
That is uncommon, only because chiefs have certain upbringing and they're raised a certain way. Usually your chief and your medicine man are two separate people. So,
And you have to make a choice.
yeah.
Because a couple of my, I don't know how many grandfather was a chief.
Oh. that's
Very
good.
nice.
Yeah. So, well, he was most likely a righteous chief and a good chief, so we got that going for you. The choice to walk the line with magic versus being a chief or being a hunter in tribes, it's a very serious choice, and it's usually made when you're a young teenager. So, these people who chose to walk the path of medicine man or healer, they're raised a certain way, and then they hit a certain stage in their life where they decide, no, they want to teach, or they want to be practitioners of black magic. So,
Yeah, the whole skinwalker lore is serious business out there, and nobody jokes that.
yeah.
A lot of bad things are skinwalkers. We actually talked to a couple of native investigators. They're called the Navajo Rangers, and you can look them up on YouTube. They were, excuse me, they were tasked to go out and investigate
I couldn't find any of my slides on them.
all sorts of crazy stuff that happened on basically on the Navajo Nation, and it's such a huge. It borders like 4 states, and they have like over 23,000 square miles of territory that they cover. And they would actually go investigate anything from Bigfoot to aliens to skinwalkers to all this sort of thing. And they told us a couple tales, especially one of them was telling about he went to go and investigate. A lady had called and was worried that she was being targeted by a skinwalker, because that's how it starts.
Yeah.
So it becomes like a progressive thing, and typically bad things happen to you. And he didn't find anything. He talked to her, calmed her down a little bit, and when he was driving back to get back on the main ride, because you may have to drive 30 miles in the middle of nowhere and then drive 30 miles back just to get on the.
His morning
On the
run was
highway.
57 miles.
Yeah, this is the other guy. It's not the same
Yeah.
guy. But when he was going back and heading back towards the main road on the dirt road, he said when he looked out his passenger side window, he seen something like a skinwalker running, like on all fours right next to him. And he said when the car got to about 75 miles an hour, he thought he was starting to pull away from it to get away, because he's obviously terrified. And then when he didn't see it anymore, and then when he looked over on the left, it was right there. And he said he come flying up on the highway and just hit it. And he said, yeah, I never went back there. So what about the lady? I called her and let her know that she might want to talk to somebody, but I never went back there.
But
But-
that, and that
So,
was the thing.
and that's the sort of the mythos behind it. You see when they're dressed like skinwalkers, but then you have people that make reports of obvious weird stuff in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah.
in the desert, and the highways, and they'll tell you, if you're traveling in some of these dirt roads and highway roads in the desert, boarding reservations, you don't pick anyone up, don't
Do
stop.
not pick anyone up.
Yes, ma'am.
So, a skinwalker can have magic enough to run fast as a car?
Yes. Native beliefs believe a lot in the elements and the power of themselves and things like that. So the skinwalker could have said, I want to run as fast as the wind. And apparently that's as fast as a 60-mile-per-hour car, you know? They harness the power of not just the native beliefs, but of the elements, but they use it for the wrong purposes. So in a lot of skinwalker incidents, it's more of a revenge or a curse type thing. So that lady that the Navajo Ranger was interviewing, she had a land dispute. The one edge of her land was somebody else's land at some point. They fell on hard times, their land went into estate or sale. They were upset about it, so they put a curse on her. And the skinwalker came to get her, basically. Things like illness or destroying your livestock or even hunting you down. Those are the things that skinwalkers will do. When we went out towards that Navajo area, we camped in Grants, New Mexico, in a beautiful, beautiful area. We stopped along the Continental Divide and we were hiking the Continental Divide, which is a trail. And we started walking and we saw a pair of shoes, a pair of running shoes. Another couple of feet, we saw a pair of shorts. Another couple of feet, we saw a backpack and a shirt. And then we came upon another 10, 25 feet or whatever, came across this dead wolf. And it looks like it's been beaten to death. They were throwing rocks at it. However, the wolf, what's not in this picture, is another piece of clothing. So, did somebody beat a skinwalker to death? Or did they beat a wolf to death?
And we talk to people, so yeah, we're gonna go out that way and go hiking. Like, watch out for skinwalkers, man, they're over.
The
And we
problem,
joked about it, and then, you know, it's like,
this happened.
so we left.
We immediately left.
So if you're ever out in the woods and you hear something, identify where the noise is and where it comes from. Make sure you're good with your surroundings, and then get in the car and go home. That's how you.
Could they be here,
Hmm.
or would they only have to stay?
So,
Most skinwalkers aren't necessarily bound by location.
yeah.
Their power is supposedly stronger on the reservation because people, like-minded people, have like-minded beliefs, and that sort of feeds energy into it. A different equivalent of a skinwalker would be a shapeshifter. And something like a dogman or a werewolf could be almost like a skinwalker. But a lot of native sort of beliefs and native lore is tied to the land. So could they be here? Sure. But I don't think necessarily it's as popular here
Yeah.
as it is, because you have Cherokee reservation and things like that. But out in New Mexico, there's reservations everywhere. So there's a lot more land, so there's a lot more instances of having more people that believe in that sort of thing, so.
And they draw their energy from the land. So
Right.
if it's not sacred native land, they're not going to be as strong or as common.
Are they full Native Americans?
You don't have to be full on Native American. You just need to have native blood.
Yeah. So,
Because there's a lot of mixed culture out there.
but
you know.
you do have to have the traditions taught to you. So you would have to be invested in the tribe and learn all the traditions and learn the culture and the
Yeah.
magic
And there's a lot of reservations where those traditions aren't taught.
anymore.
Yeah. Because a lot of the younger people aren't interested. They
Yeah.
don't. They don't care. It doesn't have the same value to them. So a lot of that sort of dies away. So, as a matter of fact, you hear more stories about, you know, young natives trying to perform a ceremony or a ritual, and things going completely wrong because they don't know how to stop. They don't know when to stop. They don't know where to quit. So,
Yeah.
kind of like when people play with Ouija boards and they don't close them when they're done. You just let something out. It's that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And also with the land being the way it is, the more you pave over and sort of like modernize the land, it's not the same. So we're in an area where there's roads everywhere, it's been paved, it's been developed. Out there, it's still wide open, so. When you used to say, you never know who the skinwalker is. That's why they try to hide.
Shh.
So they wear the mask.
You want this very room.
Yeah, maybe showed up a little late.
Maybe she has.
Skinwalking.
Yeah, it does sound walking.
So, all right, Bigfoot, right? When you think of Sasquatch, do you think of Sasquatch being out in the desert?
Yeah.
Yeah, because what are they gonna eat?
Skinwalkers.
Sand.
Wolf.
The skin
Dirt?
that's a good answer,
Yeah, bugs.
actually.
Other skinwalkers? I don't know. We were surprised. We had a couple different experiences, but we were actually surprised. After we had our couple of experiences, I'll tell you about one of them because there will be a part two where we talk about some other stuff in the future. It was the creepiest thing I think we've had happen to us because of the intent behind it. But when we left and got back to internet service, we did a quick Google and found, wow, there is a ton of Bigfoot sightings right where we were. We actually went camping and we talked about Jemez a little bit. It's really close to our house. It's only 30 miles away. And
Yeah, the Jemez National Forest and Jemez National Recreation Area. It's beautiful. It's right next to the Jemez Pueblo.
yeah,
It's this huge area that goes all the way north almost to Colorado. It does hit the Santa Fe National Forest, but it's so blended. It's a lush forest for New Mexico.
there's bear and elk and all sorts of crazy stuff.
Huge elk.
And we would go take pictures. And there was a couple different places we would repeatedly take pictures, and we were the only ones there, which was unusual. And we pulled in, and our dogs did not want to get out, which was also unusual. Like, they always wanted out. They never want to be.
Especially this area, because
Yeah.
it was the only place that had grass, because that's another thing about New Mexico.
A lot of grass, yeah. And dogs like grass. You know, they want to eat and roll around in it and stuff. Especially our dogs. So she's taking pictures of the waterfall and some rapids and things like that. And the dogs didn't want to get out. She was hiding behind the big dog. The big dog's like, I am absolutely not. I know he had to pee, but he was like, I am not getting out.
Yeah.
Because the places he could go visit, you know, there's miles in between them. And so standing there listening to all that water, and she's down on the rocks taking pictures, I hear a baby cry from up above. And this area is in a canyon. Like, have you ever seen Raiders of the Lost Ark where they have like the walls of the canyon? It looks like that.
Actually, one of the Raiders movies did use footage from New Mexico.
And this is a place called Gilman Tunnels where we were. And you could hear it clear. I heard it clear as day. And it made all the hair on my head stand up because it didn't sound like a baby cry. And it wasn't like a mountain lion making that whiny baby kind of cry noise. It sounded like something mimicking a baby cry to get my attention. Like the intent was to get my attention. And it wasn't,
Well,
and it
that's
didn't
why
sound like a
you can't allow.
person trying to make this baby cry. It just, you know, red alert, man. All the hair stood up. So she started taking pictures, and I'm like, get your stuff, let's go right now.
I am literally on, okay, there's not a good picture, but I am on 3 different rocks, hanging over a rock to get a waterfall shot, and I have to scurry and climb back up. I don't hear anything except for the waterfall, and it's so loud that you kind of start to get mesmerized by the water, and you're just like, so he's been screaming my name for like 2 minutes, and finally he gets right to the edge and says, we are getting the hell out of here, sorry, but, you know, and I had no idea. Crawling back up, look up in the canyon, and I see rocks falling, just little ones, like somebody was up there. So, we get in the van and we leave.
So we Googled it
Yeah,
when we got service. And evidently, that's not an uncommon thing,
yeah.
where Sasquatch will mimic, you know, a common sound. And what better sound to get somebody's attention, whether you're animalistic or not, is to make the baby sound, right? Everybody's on red alert when it comes to babies.
Yeah, you hear
So-
a baby out in the middle of the wilderness, oh
But-
my God, let's go find it and protect it. That's human instinct. Not, so was it,
Depends on how hungry you are.
that's true.
Was
Yeah.
that the dog that was hiding behind the big dog?
Yeah, our bigger dog passed away, but she used
Yeah,
to.
it was her.
She was the one who was hiding. And she is usually fearless. Pepper has confronted gangs of coyotes. She's barked at a wolf. She's attacked a rattlesnake. She's a fairly feisty little dog when she's not napping.
She's not feisty right now.
Yeah, she's napping.
She had a full belly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
She's full of fried chicken.
She likes the Colonel's chicken.
Yeah.
But
It's in-
I'll go back. I did want to mention, so as far as this area, Jimenez National Forest, since 2013, major Bigfoot organizations like BFRO and even University of New Mexico have been investigating the place for Bigfoot. To the point where in July 2017, New Mexico Senate Bill 243 states, state funds cannot be used for the purpose of researching, locating, or finding Bigfoot. However, state funds can be used for the search for skinwalkers, thunderbirds, living dinosaurs, or other phenomena.
Living dinosaurs.
Yeah,
Yes.
that's also something that you'll hear out there where people say, because you're used to seeing lizards and things like that, but they'll say, man, I just seen a 4-foot lizard running on 2 feet.
Yeah.
Gecko.
So, yes, sir.
Sorry, I just thought of something. Wouldn't chickens technically be living dinosaurs? So if there was a living dinosaur, it technically wouldn't be a dinosaur, like be classified as
Only if you
something
believe that
else?
dinosaurs have feathers. There's still a bunch that don't.
Some dinosaurs did have feathers, some did not. So, but they actually had to pass a Senate bill saying you cannot use tax dollars to look for Bigfoot, because that's how heavily concentrated and how much interest there is in finding Bigfoot in the Jimenez area. We had a university professor spend over $17,000 just on one research trip. Granted, he only looked for Bigfoot for a couple of hours and the rest was spent eating pizza and having a fun time. So, yeah.
Yeah, he partied it up and then said he couldn't find Bigfoot. That Bigfoot was elusive.
Yes.
They were in a big party. So in the middle of
But
nowhere.
how many states do you know actually have to pass a House bill saying you can't use tax dollars to find Bigfoot? Only New Mexico, so, yeah.
Do you guys search for Bigfoot a lot, or?
His brother does. His brother looks for Bigfoot here in North Carolina, so.
Dum, dum, dum. I'm not a fast runner. I'm not even a fast walker. So I'm probably not gonna go hunt for Bigfoot that much because you kinda gotta go way out there. And I'm not trying to walk 6 miles just to go see stuff. Because when I turned 16, I got a car. And I decided if I can help it, I'm not walking that far ever again.
Makes sense.
So, no. Okay.
'Cause what do you do if you find one? See, everybody's all like, ooh, let's go find one. What do you do if you find it?
You take a picture and run the other way.
Some people like to antagonize and get out there and, you know.
Daniel would try to pet it.
Because I know if I was an animal in the middle of nowhere and somebody kept pestering me, what are you gonna do? I'm either gonna attack it, right? Because you've just been provoking an animal. I'm gonna run away, or I'm gonna throw softball-sized rocks at you.
So,
Never know.
now, as far as phenomenon, purported UFOs, phantoms, and paranormal, again, we're gonna have to do a part 2 because there is just so much. New Mexico is home to 4 significant UFO landing reports that kicked off the extraterrestrial craze of the 1940s. Roswell, well, we all know that, 1947. However, there was also the Aztec UFO crash, which happened right outside of Cuba, New Mexico. That is where a UFO crashed so hard it actually created like a little mini dome into the earth. And multiple people reported seeing it. The whole town saw it. There were men in black.
Oil rig company.
Yeah, an oil rig company, but nobody talks about that one. And then there was also Holloman Air Force Base. That happened in 1951. Huge, multiple military personnel reported seeing lights in the sky as well as like a full-on UFO. And then we had the Dulce Archuleta Mesa incident in 1975 and 1979. This was the alien attack, supposedly. If we go to the next slide, because we might have to go back to go back. So, someplace is my map. The Dulce Air Force Base, or Dulce Military Base, is a deep underground base. Supposedly, since the 50s, this military base has been inhabited by aliens. Not just aliens are there, as in they actually inhabit this underground base. Well, this is really black hat conspiracy. There was a treaty between our government and these aliens. that
And the
they could-
reptilians.
And the reptilians, that these aliens could inhabit this underground base. But in 1975, the aliens took complete control of the base and kicked all the humans out, killed a couple of humans, supposedly had reptilian sentries at the door. And this is all in this story about this base. Well, in 1979, a group of retired Vietnam vets and special forces invaded the base, killed the aliens, sent their bodies to Area 51, and took the base over. I will provide anybody with links on the full story, but this base, you can drive over it because it's a deep underground base. You can go for miles and supposedly not know that you're on military grounds. Usually out here, especially on the East Coast, you know when you've hit military property. You could drive and accidentally end up on this base, and they have the right to shoot you on sight.
Can you explore?
Nope. That's the other thing. Nobody knows where the true entrance of this military base is. Some people say it's on the Colorado border. Other people who have more credibility actually say the entrance to the base is on a native reservation. So you would have to get the natives' permission to go onto,
There's tunnel networks that
yeah.
supposedly go from White Sands Missile Testing Range all the way through like Dulce, into Area 51, into S3, even into Denver International Airport, that there's underground tunnels that go and cover the entire area, and that they were built right after started to be built right after the first American atomic bomb was detonated, sort of kicked off the atomic age. And this brings us to Taos Hum. And in Taos, New Mexico,
Which is next to Dulce.
which is next to Dulce and Colorado and all that, for a long time, certain people could hear a hum, a low underlying hum. It sort of fell at a frequency spectrum where if you were too old, you didn't hear it, and if you were too young, you did hear it. And it went on for years, and they tried to capture acoustic signatures and record this sort of constant hum, and it was driving people kind of crazy, and they couldn't get it well enough to actually say, okay, we can actually hear this hum. And there was speculation that, you know, the crystal in the area was resonating, like quartz crystals and things like that. But I like the theory that basically that they were using atomic drilling machines to drill these tunnels, because they have nuclear drilling machines that actually are nuclear powered, and they actually drill using nuclear stuff to melt and go through all these rocks. And that's what you were hearing was the vibration of all the construction happening when they were building these long tunnels. Because there's supposed to be a huge underground tunnel that connects the East Coast to the West Coast, large enough to send submarines and things like that through.
Well, that
Whether or
makes
not that's
sense, yeah.
true, I don't know.
Now, the
But
weird
it
thing
makes
is-
sense for the underground drilling, because there are, in that particular area with Los Alamos and everything else, there are large military installations that are underground in these mountains
that are
yeah,
fact, you know.
they have them, and, you know, they also have them on the East Coast as well, because that's what they did, because they were afraid that after the atomic bomb, World War II and all that sort of thing, because we weren't the only ones to have one. Russia had them, Germany was right there, and so that's about the only way you can protect against an atomic holocaust, right, is to be underground. So,
The weird thing
protect all
about
your stuff, right, put it underground. But
Taos Hum is that supposedly it stopped for a while. And now you don't always hear it, or the people who are affected don't always hear it. If you search for the Taos Hum online or with Google, what you do is you end up getting redirected to something called the hum, or the global hum.
yeah,
And that goes further into some of the theories that he just talked about, which is this hum is this nuclear drilling or this operation to expand an underground tunnel network. And it only happens during certain times. So lately, I think in the past couple of years, very few people have reported it, but it still happens. This is a video that I put in here. I'm not sure if it's gonna play or
it's not gonna play and you can't hear the hum.
That's true.
It just
Um,
basically sounds,
The point is, I spent 15 minutes on YouTube trying to find an accurate recording of the hum, and maybe I'm so old I don't hear it. So, go
I've
ahead.
come across it before.
Yeah, I can't hear it,
On YouTube?
so.
Yeah, on YouTube.
Yeah, that's my biggest problem, is I'm so old, maybe I don't hear it anymore, younger people can. Also, depending on what video you find, it sounds totally different. So there were a couple of videos where I heard something, but it didn't, it sounded like manufactured, honestly.
Actually, I don't know if this particular hum, but I was one time at my house just standing in my kitchen, and I heard like how you just like a woman just humming, like humming away, like singing in my kitchen, just humming. Like
That's,
she would, and I thought I heard like stuff moving around, like you would hear like pans and pots and pans moving around. Well, my pots and pans were like standing right there on my bowls and stuff, but none of it was moving, but I could hear like that moving and someone humming like they were working like around the kitchen.
were the pots and pans possibly like vibrating, is that what you heard? Like, if they were hitting together very quickly?
Yeah.
So, what,
She's hearing ghosts, man.
She's hearing
No,
a ghost.
either, either
Grandmother.
you might wanna look into that, like a paranormal thing. The other thing is are earthquakes or little ground shakes common where you live? You know, do you know if there's mining or anything like that?
I just live maybe 10 minutes from here. I
Okay.
live in Bonita.
Because mining and earthquakes and underground drilling will actually cause something similar, where you
Yeah, but it
actually.
doesn't sound like grandma. Doesn't sound like grandma humming the
But
mix.
Did you smell bacon?
And my mom actually says that she saw a very tall man watching her sleep when she woke up. And actually, all the time through my house, my dad thought because I had a white cover a long time ago, and my dad saw something white. He and my mom were up watching a movie, and we were asleep. And it was actually coming from our room, me and my brother's room. He said he saw a woman with a white dress on, but he thought I might have had my cover over my head. But then he saw like a woman figure, and it walked into actually the living room, because that's what our hallway
That's
is.
probably not the hum, that's probably paranormal. And it
That's
sounds
not
like
creepy at all.
you guys definitely need to talk to M&D Paranormal. Maybe they can help you out, because that sounds like you might have something going on in your house. Yeah, that's really interesting though. Yes.
I know one time that my house was here and I was standing right here, and my dad was coming on the side of the house, but I saw him identically coming, like mirrored on each side of the house, and I actually could not tell which one was actually him, and then it just stopped, and I think he was on this side.
So that's called the doppelganger phenomenon, and that's actually something that I've been interested in. And it's very similar to what you just described, or like, you know, like a woman knows her husband comes home from work every day at 5 p.m. So she's doing dishes or she's making dinner, and she hears his car pull up, and she hears him walk up the steps, she hears him open the door, but it's not him.
Or he's not there.
Or he's not there. And then 5 minutes later, he does pull up, he does walk up the steps, and he does come in because traffic just made him 5 minutes late that day. It's a pretty common phenomenon, so, but it's interesting that you have that, so. Now, this is the map I tried to draw of the base, and I forgot to move it to the appropriate slide, so I apologize, everyone. This is the Dulce, supposedly the entrance to the Dulce site. As you can see, this is all a reservation. These are the different mesas. Now, the incident supposedly happened in a secret entrance right here, the Archuleta Mesa. Mesa. I cannot talk today.
Archuleta.
Archuleta,
Yeah.
yeah. So, Supposedly, these special trained forces entered in through here, came all the way down through a network of underground tunnels, and kicked the aliens out.
Yay!
Yay! La Lorena, the White Woman. This is a common mythos in New Mexico and most of the Southwest, to the point that she's getting her own movie this year.
Mm-hmm.
The phenomenon is known as the White Woman. Now, there's two different stories. One is that a woman had a miscarriage or some sort of birthing difficulty, and her child passed away. And this drove her to grief to the point where she drowned in a river. The other is that this woman had 2 children, and she had a very rich lover. The rich lover said, "It's not a package deal, I don't want your kids." So she drowned her 2 children in a river. Driven by grief and madness, she passed away or drowned herself, and then began to haunt rivers, waterways, and highways of New Mexico. It's a creepy phenomenon. You don't really hear about it too much. Occasionally you'll still hear about it, especially in areas like Las Cruces. There's an area of Las Cruces that has La Arena Park, and it's a children's park.
Not
Playgrounds
creepy at all.
and swings
Gracious.
and a hiking trail where you can see pretty birds, but it's embedded in the culture. New Mexico embraces this. It's a very terrifying story, I think, because it's based in truth. I mean, it was very common for there to be single mothers struggling to make a living in the Southwest. They meet somebody better off, but he says, "I don't want your kids." So there's a lot of researchers who have done some work and said, this is probably a true story someplace.
Yeah.
Now, Zozo Bra, this is yours, because I'm,
There's a couple different weird sort of festivals and stuff out there. The one that I think is the weirdest is Zozobra,
yeah,
where you take all your stuff that's happened to you over the past year, like all your papers, all your bad luck, all that sort of thing. You write it down and you wrap it up in linen and you take it to Zozobra, who's also known as Old Man Gloom, right? And you put it in Zozobra, and there's like thousands of people that do this, and then you burn the whole thing. It's kind of set it free.
it's
It's a
I
big
love
old
that.
party, man.
it's a big old party though.
And over the years, Zozobra has grown to where this thing's like 150 feet tall. And, you know, they set it off, I think it was in 2016, and set a bunch of stuff on fire because the wind blew all this stuff. So it's a huge party.
So it's kind of like Burning Man.
Yeah,
It
it's
is.
kind of like Burning
What
Man.
if you write somebody's name down in there?
Well, that's the thing.
That's the thing.
There are people that look at what you have to make sure you're not trying to curse someone. So they actually will look at it and say, okay.
That's cool.
Well, because there was
Yeah.
a year where a lot of people wrote a governor's name and stuffed it in there.
And you know, that much intention,
did not
Yeah.
win the
I
next
mean-
election. So,
That's a thing.
they're
yeah.
really superstitious out there, and they look for that sort of thing. So if you're trying to sneak in a curse or whatever, nope,
Yeah.
that
But
won't
it
happen.
has kind of turned into more of a party, like college-y scene. So
Yeah.
you have people, like there's probably like 1,000 bad term papers in there, or probably a whole lot of pop quizzes where somebody failed.
Or it might be like divorce papers,
Yeah.
you know, mortgages, all this crazy stuff. So,
Yeah.
So it's not really like a give the word, religion type thing.
It was stemmed a little bit in certain beliefs, like Mexican beliefs, where if something bad happens and you overcome it, you celebrate by destroying it. So,
yeah. But it's
yeah.
turned into more of a not as religious. New Mexico celebrates the Day of the Dead more than any other state.
yeah.
And over the years, enough time has passed where Day of the Dead or Day of Muertos is actually celebrated everywhere now, like overseas and that sort of thing. But it started with the Aztecs, and it started before the Aztecs. And so when Spanish colonization happened, they moved it, because it used to happen in the summertime, you know, but now it's more like October, you know. But they moved it so it coincides with like All Saints Day, All Saints Eve, and all that, sort of wrap it all together. But it's where you celebrate your, you know, past loved ones.
February
Ancestors.
2nd's my birthday.
Oh,
See, so you could be all painted up.
like a sugar skull.
Yeah, and typically you'll build like an altar to your family, your past loved ones, and you have the sugar skulls that used to be made out of sugar back in the olden days. And that's how you kind of honor them, and then marigolds are the flowers of the dead. And then you make the muerte, which is bread. And so you celebrate all that. And in New Mexico, they have like a huge parade where everybody's painted up. And
Yeah.
I like skulls and creepy things. And my birthday.
sugar skulls are,
Yeah, they're
they're
not.
kind of creepy, but they're more
My
happy.
mom's due date to have me was actually Halloween.
Oh. See?
Dum, dum,
She,
dum.
So
she
you're-
had me, I think, 2 days early.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, the thing is, sugar skulls aren't meant to be creepy. They're actually meant to celebrate your ancestors. You decorate them with all those pretty flowers and everything to show honor and to show respect for those people that you cared about. And in New Mexico, yes, there are huge parades, and if you live in a major city like Albuquerque or Santa Fe, expect to be late to work on these 2 days, because that's how bad the traffic is. Because it's like, I worked in downtown, and on All Souls Day, it took me 40 extra minutes to get to work, because the streets were just crowded with parades.
It's definitely fun to
What's the
see that.
difference between one day is All Saints Day and All Souls Day? What's the difference?
So, as we know, Halloween, it's a celebration of, spirits in general, but All Saints Day, or Dia de los Innocents, I guess.
Yeah.
So that's where you celebrate the saints of the dead, those who protect the dead,
Or your favorite patron saint.
or your favorite patron saint. So, and in Catholicism and in Mexican traditions, there's a lot of different saints that you can pray to. You pray to them with the hopes that they look over and guide your passed on family members safely. and keep them
There's a
safe.
picture of one of the saints in M&D in there on the wall. You can
Yeah.
see it. And it happens to be
Mhm.
popular with a lot of people
Yeah. And
in
then
Mexico.
on the last day, which is the All Souls Day, that's where you pay a final homage to those who have passed on, and you wish them well for the continuing year. So,
Is that just with Mexicans?
I mean, if you're Catholic, or if you believe in these things, then you can.
It's
do
all
it.
over the
So,
world now, so it's,
Yeah.
and even in like places like Malaysia,
Yeah.
and they do something similar, so it's just basically honoring your, you know,
I have
your
relatives.
heritage and your relatives.
Yeah.
So it's celebrated a little bit differently, but the New Mexico version is really colorful and super happy.
I have relatives in the Philippines that celebrate Day of the Dead. So, and Coco is a good example of if you wanted to watch the Disney, there's a Pixar or Disney? Yeah, watch
Just
Coco.
picture.
So, no, again, we ran out of time for this. We had just so much
There's
stuff.
way more, it goes on and on.
We weren't sure if we should
Like
break
the
this down into
Bottomless
individual-
lakes, the giant turtle,
Yeah,
the dum-dum-dum.
and I only
Where'd you
have
put that?
4 days to do this.
It just keeps going on and on and on.
I mean, we'll do another one. There's one more slide if you
Oh, there is?
want. Yeah. Now,
Ooh,
if you
Kinda
want to
clever.
get notified when we'll do the next one of these, you can always scan this with your phone, and it'll hook you up with all of our social networks, or just grab a card or a sticker and just, keep an eye out, because one of the biggest things was we realized we couldn't put all of these, we could have gone all night about skinwalkers, because they are that interesting. The next one, maybe we'll just take a couple of subjects and just talk about them.
It'll be the next monthly meeting, right?
I don't know yet.
Oh, okay.
So I know Tess was thinking about doing something else, so we'll eventually.
Somebody's
figure
leaving
it out.
us hanging.
I
Oh
know.
my goodness.
cliffhanger.
I thought it was part 2. I always hold off to watch the part 1 if I know I'm not gonna get part 2 right away.
Now wait for next season.
We did that, yeah. But if you do have questions or you want to know more, we have an email address, and I can send you more articles on skinwalkers, or I can send you some book recommendations. I can also send you basically a reading list of some of the stuff we pulled. 80% of the photos in here, Greg or I took. So that's how beautiful the place is.
I want to get your opinions. Do you believe in fairies?
Yes. But I believe in something more than just fairies. Fairies, when we think of fairies, we think of like the English or the Irish people and how they describe them. Native Americans have their own fairies too. They were just called little people, or they were called things like puckwudgies. Fairies is a huge, just a huge catch-all for the types of little people and types of little magic that are everywhere.
I saw that something that was saying like in Ireland they found really, really little shoes that could have only been made with little hands to get that precise with the shoes. That makes you think that with how there's there's places like deserts and like woods and stuff, that if they were hiding, they'd probably hide in somewhere like deserts or woods and things like that. And I've heard things about how those little people would actually like bring down many people, like they're hiding out, but if they were like threatened by people or if they thought they were in danger, they actually could very easily take down somebody.
Yes, and it wasn't just take them down physically like Gulliver's Travels, if you've read that book.
Kill them.
Yeah, where they took him down and, you know, he was on the ground. But they could do things like, fairies weren't always nice. They could poison wells. They could poison the water supply for a whole village. They could
Take children.
take children. They could make your cows sick. So fairies aren't all lovey-dovey and wonderful. They can also be very trickster.
If you ever get taken by the fairies, don't accept anything, no food, no water, no nothing.
I would think that they would probably
They own you.
should probably be like us with it. Really depends on what they grow up with.
That's true, and that goes back to the skinwalkers as well as something we didn't talk about in this presentation, which is Coyote, the trickster. Coyote, I mean, in all intents and purposes, he does play very well into the fairy mythology of Native Americans because he is such a trickster.
Every culture has some type of little person or fairy.
Yeah, and he did have little minions. So, but yeah, a lot of people like fairies. I like them too, but I don't trust them.
I got fairy book and Sasquatch.
If you ever see a fairy in the forest and they ask you to go someplace, don't. Okay?
Isn't
No
that
gifts.
just a given for anybody at all?
Not always.
Because
Not
they can see
everybody.
nice, but
Yes. And fairies will get you lost. So.
thank you.
Yeah. But that's it. If y'all have any questions, let us know. If you think of anything, our email address is on the business cards. So, yep.
Let's get a sticker one to our car.
Like I said, if
There's
you
a
want,
sticker
you can scan
Yeah.
that with any phone. Yeah.
we can put on the top of our car.
It's a girl.
We collect stickers and put it on the top, like, ceiling of the car.
We used to do that with the Great White Buffalo
She
van.
just wants to be around
Yeah.
Great White
everybody,
Buffalo van
so.
sounds like the kind of van we would love to have.
We had stickers from everywhere. We had stickers from North Carolina, all the way
We've got a
across.
She
little
used to get super
chandelier
mad
in there.
when she wasn't up on the table.
The only problem is-
We had a
Well, she
chicken
wants to
wallet
see
and broke
everybody
on
and know
our
what's
trips.
going on.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
only problem is when the car breaks down, you can't use it anymore. So we just started decorating the
Around
car,
with your
making it
stickers.
as decorated as possible, and then it broke down.
Yeah.
Well, not broke down, it just had like
Oh, the Ghostbuster
out
car.
of control
Yeah.
mold.
Yeah.
Thank you guys very much for your good welcome.
Hey, it's stop on that camera.
Oh,
If I
okay.
had a treat for the doggy, I would give the
And
doggy.
then, like I said, he closed it. Never mind.
What?